My job is to read books. That's one of the perks of being a writer, is that you can't write without reading. And I've been reading every day for as long as I've been able to read, and that's what's made me successful. It's also made me happy, and it's made me a better human being. That culminated in, a couple years ago, I opened my own bookstore. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about some of my favorite books that have changed my life, books that I think you absolutely need to read and that will make you healthier, wealthier, wiser, and many, many other things. Let's get into it. I'm holding in my hands one of the most controversial books ever published, one of the most shoplifted books of all time, a book that's banned in the federal prison system in the United States of America. Why is it so controversial? Because it talks about a thing that we all crave and want, but also fear. It's a book about power. It's a book about how to get power. The way to get power is not always pretty. The rules by which power operates are often ugly and scary and dark. But actually, the more intimidated you are by that, the more repulsed you are by Machiavellianism or the dark side of human nature, the more important it is that you read this book, because you are so likely to be a victim of people who do understand these ideas. I'm talking about Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power. It's a primer, it's a summary, it's a survey course of all of the brilliant writings on power, the dark, alarming, scary writing, and the history of humanity as we struggle to get and protect ourselves from power. If you haven't read The 48 Laws of Power, you should. The author of this book says that everything can be taken from us. And in fact, everything was taken from him. Home, his livelihood, his work. The original manuscript of this book is lost. He loses his entire family in the Holocaust and nearly loses his own life. In Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl says, everything can be taken from us, but our ability to choose our attitude in any set of circumstances, to make our own way. This is the essence of Stoicism, that we don't control what happens to us, even something as cruel and awful as the events of the 20th century. We choose how we respond to it. Suffering is inevitable. We also have the ability to find meaning in suffering, to grow from the suffering. This is one of the most beautiful and inspiring books ever written. There's a reason it sold millions and millions of copies. If you haven't read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, you absolutely should. My aunt gave me a copy when I graduated from high school. I've read many times since. One of my absolute favorite books. You have to read it. This is one of the greatest books on the creative process ever written. Every artist, every person trying to do something faces what's called the resistance. You know you want to do it, but there's some part of you that says, do it later. Do it when you're more qualified. Do it when inspiration strikes. And this is the fundamental battle that all creative people face, the resistance. And this battle against the resistance, against our lower self to get to our higher self, every artist, every creative has to be heroic in that battle if they want to succeed, whether they reach a huge audience or a tiny one. I'm talking about The War of Art by my friend Steven Pressfield. And if you haven't read this book, it'll change your life. I reread it before I start any creative project, and so should you. In 1939, one of the best books ever written about the city of Los Angeles, but nobody appreciates it at the time because of a crazy reason. The publisher of this book, Stockdale & Son, is sued by Adolf Hitler for copyright infringement because they'd published a translation of Mein Kampf. They're bankrupted. It destroys the marketing budget of this book, which is forgotten for the next 50 years until Charles Bukowski finds John Fante's Ask the Dust on the shelves of the Los Angeles Public Library. It's rediscovered and appreciated for the amazing classic that it is, one of the great California novels, sort of a West Coast Great Gatsby, that every single person should read. It was made into a kind of a mediocre movie with Colin Farrell. It's one of my all-time favorite novels. I've read it 3 or 4 times. If you haven't read it, you absolutely should, just to give a nice middle finger to Adolf Hitler. This is a book where I think the subtitle is actually more important than the title. It's a book about leadership in the only real context that matters. It's about leadership in turbulent times. It's easy to be a leader when everything is easy. It's hard to be a leader when it's not. Doris Kearns Goodwin, one of the great biographers of all time, put out this amazing collection, sort of like her greatest hits album, of profiles of leaders who led through profound adversity and difficulty. Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Lyndon Johnson, Abraham Lincoln. It's about leaders who didn't get the good fortune that they deserved, who had to lead through moments of crises and frustration, bad times, and managed to respond well to that. Not perfectly, and nor would anyone argue, Goodwin least of all, that they were perfect people. But there's wonderful ideas in this book about how to be a better leader, and if you haven't read it, you should go get it right now. This is not only one of the greatest books ever written, it's maybe the only one of its kind. It's written by the most powerful man in the world, who has no intention of publication, who'd probably be mortified that his thoughts on everything from losing his temper to his fear of death would ever be known to people. It's a person who had enormous wealth, enormous fame, and yet he's talking to himself about justice, self-discipline, wisdom, and courage. And the writing is so beautiful, so specific, and yet so universal at the same time that there's never been a book like it before, and there'll probably never be a book like it again. Talking about Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. If you haven't read it, you must. The guy that wrote this book had every reason to be angry. He spends 10 years convalescing from this horrible illness. He gets exiled by the emperor for totally made up charges. He spends 8 years of his life on this island in the middle of the ocean. And yet he ends up writing some of the greatest thinking on how to not lose your temper. And I'm talking about Seneca. This is a collection of his essays. It's called How to Keep Your Cool. It's important that we see the Stoics not as being emotionless, but having kind of an even keel, even when things are going great and when they're going terrible. And Seneca, an advisor to a later emperor who had a bit of an anger problem, knows a lot about why we have to tame that temper. And there is no uglier emotion than anger, Seneca says, and there is no greater remedy for it than delay. Letting it sit, letting it cool down. Also, some selective ignorance. You want to be less angry? Be less aware. Stop monitoring everything that's happening. By the Princeton University Press, translated by James Rahm, is a great read that every leader and thinker should read. The Stoics wrote for a long time about adversity and difficulty, and we take them at their word. What's incredible about this book, that it's written by a fighter pilot who shot down over Vietnam. As he is parachuting down, knowing he's going to be taken prisoner, knowing that he very well could die, this man says to himself, I'm leaving the world of technology and entering the world of Epictetus. What he's doing then is testing the doctrines of Epictetus in the laboratory of human experience. James Stockdale spends 7+ years in what now is called the Hanoi Hilton. He's locked in solitary confinement. He's tortured, as Epictetus was, and yet all the time he's focusing on what Epictetus talked about, that a podium and a prison is each a place. In any of these situations, good or bad, we have a certain freedom of choice. And what will we do with that choice? Who will we be with that choice? This book by James Bond Stockdale, Medal of Honor recipient, goes on to be an admiral. He's this heroic figure who comforts the other prisoners, who helps steel their will and make them determined and strong. It's called Courage Under Fire. It's an exploration of the Stoics in one of the most difficult circumstances you could possibly imagine. And that's why it's worth this very short, very brief, very life-changing read. This is a book that you can tell when I read it for the first time, I was struck by a few things. This is written by one of the most famous Romans of all time. He's near the end of his life. He was the advisor to the emperor. He probably knows that he's a marked man, that the emperor is soon going to kill him. He's been studying philosophy his whole life. And he has this friend who's in a prominent position of power. He's a governor of a Roman province. He wants to write some advice to that guy. They have this exchange back and forth where they're writing these letters to each other about life, about the world, the things we struggle with, where to find peace, how to avoid the traps that other people fall into. I'm talking about Seneca. This is not actually what Seneca looked like, long story, but Seneca writes these letters to his friend Lucilius. And I think it's one of the most incredible books written about success, about failure, about learning. Ultimately, he defines philosophy. I think this is great. He says, how do you know you're making progress with this philosophy? I know because I've begun to be a better friend to myself. So read Seneca's letters. It's amazing. I read a lot. It's sort of my job. You can't write without reading. But for almost 15 years now, once a month, I send out an email with my favorite book recommendations for that month. Books that I've been reading, books that I've been going through, books that changed my life, that inspired me, that I think connect to what's happening in the world. And you could sign up right now at ryanholiday.net/reading list.